The night was supposed to be perfect. Ethan Miller had rehearsed his words 100 times on his way to the restaurant, fingers brushing against the small velvet box in his pocket like a secret heartbeat. The rain fell in thin sheets, soaking his jacket, but he barely noticed. He was too focused on the moment he had built up in his mind. Tonight wasn't just dinner. Tonight was the start of forever, or at least that's how he imagined it. Standing outside the upscale restaurant, he peered through the glass, expecting to see Claire Adams waiting for him. Instead, what he saw stopped his breath cold. Claire wasn't alone. She was laughing, eyes shining in a way that once belonged only to him. Her hand intertwined with James Whitmore's, a man Ethan recognized instantly from glossy business magazines and society pages. James, the kind of man who never worried about bills, who never had to scrape together rent or chase freelance work to make ends meet. Ethan froze, the words he had planned dissolving into silence as the velvet box felt heavier than iron in his pocket. In that moment, the night shifted from hope to heartbreak, from promise to betrayal. When Claire finally emerged from the restaurant, the glow of candlelight still lingering in her smile, Ethan stepped forward from the shadows, rain dripping from his hair. His voice trembled as he asked the question he already knew the answer to. Who is he? The softness in Claire's expression vanished, replaced by something colder, rehearsed. She didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she sighed, as if this revelation was overdue. "Ethan," she said gently, almost pitying, "I've been seeing James for months." The words cracked like thunder in the night. Ethan's chest tightened, the air leaving him as if someone had punched him. He stammered, desperate for some explanation, but Claire only pressed on. Her tone was soft, but her words cut deeper than any scream could. "You're kind, Ethan. But kindness doesn't pay rent. James can give me the life I deserve." The rain masked the tears that welled in Ethan's eyes, but it couldn't hide the tremor in his hands. He thought of the long nights they'd shared, the plans they whispered, the sacrifices he'd made so she could chase her dreams. And now, with a few sentences, she had reduced him to nothing more than a stepping stone. Ethan stood there in the storm, water soaking his clothes. The velvet box still pressed against his palm, unopened, and now utterly meaningless. For 5 years, he had given everything he had to Claire, not wealth or luxury, but time, loyalty, and a love so unwavering it had anchored his very identity. And yet, in the harsh glow of the streetlights, he realized none of it was enough. She had chosen someone richer, someone shinier, someone who could give her the world Ethan had been struggling to build one brick at a time. His voice caught in his throat. No rebuttal, no plea, only silence. He could only watch as Claire slipped into James's waiting car, leaving Ethan in the downpour, abandoned and broken. The ache in his chest felt unbearable, but beneath it all stirred something sharper, something bitter. As he turned away, his mind whispered a truth that carved itself into his memory like a scar. She loved me until someone richer came along. And in that moment, my whole world collapsed. That single line became the heartbeat of his despair, the cruel hook on which his story would hang. And though Ethan didn't know it yet, it was also the beginning of a transformation that betrayal alone could ignite. Ethan Miller had grease on his hands before he could even write his own name. The Miller family auto shop sat on the edge of town, not flashy, not modern, but a place with history etched into every dented toolbox and faded photo on the walls. His father built it from nothing, and when illness took him too soon, the responsibility fell squarely on Ethan's shoulders. At 28, he was the anchor of both the shop and his small family. Ethan wasn't rich, not even close. Some months, keeping the lights on felt like balancing on a tightrope. But he carried the weight quietly, shoulders straight, jaw set, never once complaining. People knew him as dependable, honest, maybe too honest in a world where cutting corners paid faster. Still, Ethan had dreams, not extravagant ones. He didn't want yachts or What he wanted was stability, a home he could call his own, laughter echoing in hallways, a kitchen filled with the smell of dinner cooked for someone he loved. For years he thought that someone was Claire Adams. Every extra shift, every scraped knuckle from working late into the night was for her. For them, he imagined handing her the keys to a house one day. Imagined their kids running around the yard. Imagined her smile lighting up the kind of simple, steady life he knew he could give. But the world rarely rewarded quiet dreamers. In the eyes of others, Ethan was just a mechanic. People tipped their heads politely, but there was always that faint condescension, as if his worth could be measured only in oil stains and minimum wage hours. Ethan didn't fight it. He let people underestimate him, believing that love, real love, would outweigh the rest. Claire Adams was born into a world of almosts. Her childhood home always felt one step behind. Bills stacked on the kitchen counter, second-hand clothes from cousins, vacations that never happened. Her parents were good people, hard-working, decent, but ordinary. And ordinary was the one thing Claire promised herself she would escape. From a young age, she studied the glossy lives of people on magazine covers, the curated perfection of celebrities online. She envied not just their beauty or money, but the way they seemed untouchable. Beyond the struggles that weighed down her own family when she met Ethan, she fell for him genuinely, deeply, at least at first. He was kind in a way that felt rare. He listened, he cared, and when she looked into his eyes, she felt safe. For a while, that was enough. But safety and love couldn't silence the gnawing restlessness inside her. Claire began to notice the small things, the peeling paint in Ethan's apartment, the way his shirt smelled faintly of motor oil, the exhaustion on his face after long shifts. She told herself it wasn't his fault. He was doing his best. But every time she scrolled past pictures of luxury vacations or friends climbing corporate ladders, a quiet resentment bloomed. Then came James Whitmore. He was everything Ethan wasn't. Wealthy, polished, effortlessly confident. He moved through the world like it belonged to him, and in many ways it did. With James, Claire glimpsed the life she had always craved: champagne dinners, silk dresses, the thrill of being chosen by someone who could give her more than she ever dreamed. Was it love? Not really, but it was intoxicating. And slowly, she convinced herself that Ethan's loyalty and warmth were not enough. She wanted more. James Whitmore had never worked a day in his life the way Ethan had. Heir to Whitmore Holdings, he grew up in a world where limits didn't exist. Money solved everything, and people rarely told him no. To him, relationships weren't about love, they were acquisitions. Women, especially, were trophies to be displayed, reminders of his charm, his status. Claire caught his eye at a charity gala, not because she stood out, but because she didn't belong. Her hunger for more practically radiated off her. James recognized it instantly. It was the same hunger that fueled so many of his conquests, the desire to escape, to upgrade, to prove something. For James, Claire wasn't a soulmate. She was a possession, another jewel in his collection. He showered her with attention, gifts, access to his glittering world. He didn't love her, but he didn't need to. Claire's willingness to be dazzled was enough. In his mind, he wasn't stealing her from Ethan. He was rescuing her from mediocrity. And if she got hurt in the process, that was her fault for being naive. At home, Ethan's mother, Karen, was a constant reminder of duty. She had spent her life keeping the shop afloat alongside her late husband, and now relied on Ethan to carry that torch. She admired his loyalty, but often feared it chained him too tightly, especially to Claire. "You deserve someone who sees you, Ethan," she'd say, her eyes tired but kind. His younger sister Sophie was even more outspoken. At 22, she had fire in her veins, a bluntness Ethan sometimes envied. Sophie never liked Claire. She saw the way Claire's eyes lingered on expensive handbags, the subtle sighs when Ethan mentioned late nights at the shop. Sophie wasn't surprised when Claire drifted. She was only surprised it took her this long. On the other side, Claire had her best friend Madison, someone who tried to hold up a mirror Claire refused to look into. Madison noticed the shift in Claire's behavior, the way she became distracted, distant, always glancing at her phone. Madison warned her, "Ethan loves you. Don't throw that away for shiny things." But Claire brushed her off, insisting she deserved more, that Madison didn't understand. Madison did understand. She understood that Claire was walking a dangerous line, confusing temporary thrills for lasting happiness. As the story opens, Ethan's world is held together by fragile hope. The shop is barely breaking even. His mother's health worries him, and Sophie keeps urging him to see Claire's cracks. But Ethan is blinded by love. He's saved for months to buy a modest engagement ring, the velvet box now a symbol of every sacrifice he's made. He believes with absolute certainty that proposing to Claire will mark the turning point, the start of the future he's always dreamed of. Meanwhile, Claire is already halfway gone. She still meets Ethan, still accepts his kindness, but her heart leaps when James calls. With James, she feels glamorous. With Ethan, she feels stuck. The night Ethan plans his proposal, Claire is already in James's world, clinking glasses of wine, laughing at jokes Ethan wouldn't make. To her, Ethan represents the life she's been trying to escape, and James represents the life she's convinced she deserves. This is the collision course. 1. Man with everything to give but no wealth. One woman torn between loyalty and desire, and one man who sees love as nothing but conquest. By the time Ethan sees Claire's hand in James's, the story has already begun to unravel, and the proposal in his pocket turns into the sharpest wound of his life. The morning after the confrontation outside the restaurant, Ethan sat in silence as rain tapped against the windows of his apartment. His phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "We need to talk." The words felt final, heavy, and yet he clung to a shred of hope that maybe she would change her mind, that the Claire he loved was still there beneath the shallow choices. When she arrived, she didn't cry, didn't hesitate. She simply placed a small cardboard box on the table. Inside were his belongings, a few t-shirts he had left at her place, an old hoodie she used to wear, and a framed photo of them from years ago, now face down. Her tone was flat, businesslike. "It's over, Ethan," she said, as if severing 5 years was no harder than cancelling a subscription. He wanted to ask why, to fight for them, but the look in her eyes told him it was useless. She had already moved on, already chosen James. The velvet box sat hidden in Ethan's pocket, never to be opened, its weight now mocking him. When she walked out the door, the silence she left behind was deafening. He felt hollow, stripped of the future he had built in his mind. Love, he realized, doesn't always die with anger or drama. Sometimes it ends with nothing but cold indifference, and that was somehow worse. It wasn't until a week later that the deeper betrayal surfaced. Ethan had been checking his savings account, the small fund he'd been building for years, a down payment for a house, a safety net for the life he planned with Claire. The number on the screen was far lower than it should have been. Confusion twisted into dread as he dug through old statements. Withdrawals, dinners at expensive restaurants, boutique purchases, hotel stays. His stomach turned as the truth settled. Claire hadn't just left him for James. She had been using his money to fuel her double life. financing nights out with the man she swore she had only just begun seeing. The betrayal sank claws deeper than heartbreak ever could. It wasn't only his heart she had stolen. It was his future, his sacrifices, his trust. When the truth reached his family, Sophie exploded with fury, her words sharp and unfiltered. "She was never good enough for you, Ethan, and you knew it. You just refused to see it." Her anger only magnified his shame. His mother's silence was worse. Disappointment